Okay, so get ready, because today we are taking a deep dive into Ted Chiang's Story of Your Life, and we're putting it alongside the Law of One.
Wow.
So we're going to be talking about aliens, this crazy time-bending language, and getting like a huge cosmic perspective on consciousness.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you have a science fiction story and then these like channeled messages, and they both touch on things like free will and the nature of time.
Right.
Like in Chang's story, you have a linguist and their whole world just gets like blown apart because of this alien language.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, you have the raw material, like offering this grand spiritual view of existence. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's like on the one hand, you have a story that's super intimate, it's about a mom and her daughter,
Yeah.
but then you have this other side, which is like this expansive view of the universe and where we fit into all of it.
Right, exactly.
But they both ask kind of similar questions. It's really interesting.
Totally. And in the story of your life, you have the protagonist, and she meets these heptapods, and their language, heptapod B, like totally changes how she understands time. And she starts experiencing past, present, and future all at the same time.
Whoa, that's wild.
Right.
It's like her brain gets rewired by this alien language, and then boom, she sees time in a totally different way.
Yeah,
Does that connect to the Law of One at all?
it totally does.
Okay.
What's super interesting is how this whole idea of time not being linear, that's kind of what the raw material is all about too.
Really?
Yeah, so think about it. Like, we experience time as a straight line.
Right, past, present, future.
Exactly. But the raw material and even Chiang's story, they're both saying, well, maybe that's not the whole picture.
So you're saying there's a bigger picture where time isn't a straight line.
That's exactly it.
Whoa.
Yeah. So in the Law of One, Ra talks about this idea of time-space.
Okay.
And that's where all moments exist at the same time.
So it's not like the past is gone and the future hasn't happened yet.
Exactly.
Okay, wait, hold on. So time-space. Is that like some higher dimension where time doesn't work the way we normally think about it?
You could think of it that way, yeah. Like it's this level of reality that's totally beyond how we usually see things.
I see.
And the cool thing is that Chiang's story and the Law of One, they both say that how we see time, it's not just some philosophy thing.
Yeah.
It actually affects how we live and experience reality.
So like if we think of time as a straight line, that changes things. Versus if we think of it as all happening at once.
Exactly, you got it.
Wow.
In the story, when she learns this alien language, she can see how all these events are connected.
Right.
And she makes choices knowing a lot more than she did before.
Interesting.
Now, think about the Law of One.
Okay.
One of the biggest things it talks about is this idea that we have free will, but we also exist within a framework of predetermination.
Wait, so how does that work? Like how
Yeah.
can we have both free will and predetermination?
I know it's like a paradox, right? It's like we're choosing our path. But the endpoint is already known in that time-space reality. The thing is, our choices, they still matter, even if the big picture, the outcome, is already set.
Okay. I think I'm starting to kind of get it,
Yeah,
but I have a feeling it's going to get weirder from here.
it might.
We haven't even talked about all the Law of One stuff, about densities and harvest and all of that.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay.
But before we jump into that,
Yeah.
I think there's another super trippy concept that both the story and the Law of One talk about.
Okay. What's that?
It's about how language can actually shape reality.
Ooh, yes.
Like in the story of your life.
Yeah.
When she learns heptapod B, it's not just about new words. It actually changes how she sees the world. It's like it rewires her brain.
That's.
And is that connected to the Law of One's whole thing about thought shaping reality?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Rad talks about how when we think, we're creating energy patterns, and these energy patterns actually affect what happens to us.
Interesting.
They call these thought forms.
Thought forms. Okay.
So in a way, Chiang and the Law of One are both saying that language, both the language we speak and the language of our thoughts, that language has an effect on the world.
So like if I keep thinking, oh, I'm going to have a bad day,
Yeah.
I'm actually making it more likely that I will have a bad day.
It's not quite that simple.
Okay.
But the idea is that our thoughts and how we express them with language, they have consequences.
Interesting.
Now think about this. If our thoughts shape reality and learning a new language changes how we think, right?
Right.
Well, could changing how we use language actually change reality on a deeper level?
Whoa. Okay. So like if I learned heptapod B,
Yeah.
could I start seeing the future too?
Maybe not in the same way as the protagonist in the story, but who knows, right? The point is, both the story of your life and the Law of One, They make us think differently about the connection between language, thought, and reality.
Yeah, this is already blowing my mind, and I feel like we've only just started.
Right.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's time to go deeper into the law of one
Okay.
and look at things like densities
Yeah,
and the veil of forgetting.
right.
And then we can see how all of that connects to what happens to the protagonist in the story of your life.
This is going to be amazing. Buckle up, everyone.
It is.
This deep dive is about to get super intense.
Yes. Welcome back to our deep dive into the story of your life and the law of one.
Oh man, last time things got really wild when we were talking about time-space.
It's a lot to take in, right?
Yeah, my brain is still like buzzing from trying to think about time, not as a line, but like this giant web where everything's happening at once.
It's definitely a big shift in perspective.
It is.
But remember, Chiang's story and the law of one, they're both kind of hinting that this isn't just some theory. It actually affects how we understand ourselves and make choices.
Okay, so before we go too far down that rabbit hole,
No.
you mentioned we were going to talk about densities from the law of one.
Yes.
What are those exactly? Is it like talking about how dense something is, like matter?
Not really. So in the law of one, densities are more like levels of spiritual evolution or like stages of consciousness.
Oh, okay, so it's like we're on this cosmic ladder and we're trying to reach higher and higher levels of awareness.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay,
And according to the law of one, we're currently moving from third density to fourth density.
third density, fourth density. Okay, now it's starting to sound a little bit like Star Trek.
I know, right?
Can you break that down for me? Like, what does it mean to be in third density and what makes fourth density so special?
So third density is where we are now, and it's all about self-awareness and developing our own individual identity. It's where we have to deal with duality, like good and bad, light and dark,
Yeah.
and we have to make choices and figure out the whole balance between helping ourselves and helping others.
Which, now that you mention it, those are big themes in the story of your life, too.
Right.
The protagonist, she's always wrestling with those questions about choices and free will and what it all means.
That's so true, and that's what makes this so cool. Like, we're seeing how this sci-fi story and these channeled messages, they're both getting at some really fundamental truths about being human.
I like that.
So to answer your question about fourth density, it's often described as a density of love and understanding.
Oh, wow.
It's a state of consciousness where we go beyond that duality we were talking about.
Okay.
And we start to see how everything is connected and compassion and service to others. That becomes like the main driving force.
So it's not just about our individual journey anymore.
Exactly.
It's about understanding how we're connected to something much bigger.
Right. And according to the law of one, this shift to fourth density happens through something called harvest.
Harvest, like reaping what you sow.
You could put it that way, yeah.
Right.
It's like this point where we're all evaluated, both individually and as a group, based on the choices we've made and the level of consciousness we've reached.
So it's like a giant cosmic report card.
Sort of, and those who have been all about love and helping others, they move on to fourth density.
Okay.
And those who are still kind of stuck in selfish desires, they stay in third density to keep learning.
So where does the protagonist in the story of your life fit into all this?
That's a good question.
She knows the future. She makes these choices. Is she on the path to fourth density?
I think that gets to the heart of what both Chiang and the Law of One are trying to tell us.
Okay.
Free will doesn't mean knowing everything or avoiding tough situations.
Right.
It's about choosing how we respond to whatever life throws at us and whether we choose to act from a place of love or fear.
So even though she knows her daughter will have a short life, choosing to have her anyway, to experience that love, that could be seen as an act of compassion.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to another important concept from the Law of One.
Okay, what's that?
It's called the veil of forgetting.
The veil of forgetting. What's that all about?
So Ra explains that when we're born into third density, there's this veil that's placed over our awareness.
Okay.
We forget our past lives, we forget our connection to the source, we forget the true nature of reality.
Wait, why would we do that? Wouldn't it be easier to evolve if we remembered everything?
It might seem that way, but Ra says that the veil has a purpose.
Okay.
It lets us fully experience all the challenges and contrasts of being in third density.
Let's see.
And we get to make choices without being weighed down by what we knew before. And we learn and grow through what they call catalyst.
Catalyst, right? We talked about that before.
Yeah.
Those events or experiences, sometimes difficult ones, that kind of push us to evolve and face our shadow selves.
Yeah. You got it. And here's where the connection to the story of your life gets really interesting.
Okay.
Even though she knows her future, including all the heartbreak, The protagonist chooses to embrace it all.
It's like she's playing the game of life on a whole other level.
Right.
She accepts the joy and the sorrow, knowing that it all helps her grow and maybe even contributes to something bigger than herself.
It's a beautiful example of what it means to live with that awareness of how everything is connected, even when things are tough.
Okay, my mind is officially blown.
Mine too.
There's so much to think about, but before we get completely lost in all this, how does this relate to the listener?
Well, the main thing to remember is that we don't need to know everything or see the future to make choices that come from a place of love.
Okay.
The veil of forgetting is there for a reason. It lets us experience all the richness and complexity of being human.
So it's not about avoiding challenges or trying to skip over the hard parts of life.
No, it's about understanding that every moment, every choice, every interaction, it's all an opportunity to learn and grow.
And even when things are hard, there's a bigger picture unfolding.
Exactly. It's like we're all part of this cosmic dance.
I love that, a cosmic dance.
And I think that leads us perfectly into our final part, where we'll talk about what all of this means for our own lives and the choices we make.
Okay, listeners, get ready. We're about to wrap up this deep dive with some really powerful insights and questions that might change the way you see the world. All right, so welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. And man, we have been through a lot.
We have.
We've been through time space, we've talked about densities and the veil of forgetting. It's like my brain is full.
It's a lot to take in, for sure. But, we've really only scratched the surface of all these big ideas.
I know, right? It's like every time we think we understand something, there's another layer underneath waiting to be explored.
And that's what's so cool about it. Both the story of your life and the law of one. They're not about giving us all the answers. They're about embracing the mystery and knowing there's always more to learn.
I like that. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try to bring it all together. We've talked about language shaping reality, time being interconnected, the whole free will versus predetermination thing. Where does it all lead?
I think it points to a big shift in how we see things, like moving away from that limited, ego-driven view of reality that we tend to get stuck in.
So it's about understanding that we're part of something so much bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And that our choices, our actions, even our thoughts, they all have these ripple effects that go way beyond what we can see.
Which reminds me of that moment in the story of your life when the protagonist decides to have her daughter, even though she knows it's going to be heartbreaking.
It's such a powerful moment.
It is.
It's like she's saying yes to all of life, the good and the bad, the joy and the sorrow.
And that even when there's suffering, there's a deeper meaning, something we might not understand right away.
And it kind of brings us back to the law of one's idea of service to others.
Right, is that what she's embodying in that choice, do you think?
It's definitely one way to see it. Her choice to go through that loss so that another soul can come into the world, a soul that might help consciousness evolve.
It's like she's choosing to serve a greater purpose.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that selfless acts don't always look how we expect them to. Sometimes the most selfless thing is to embrace all of life, even the hard parts.
And that brings us back to the law of one's idea about the choice between serving others and serving ourselves.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So every choice we make, everything we do, it's a chance to move towards one path or the other.
Exactly. And even though the veil of forgetting might be hiding that choice from our conscious mind, it doesn't make it any less important.
So even if we don't remember our past lives or where we came from, we're still making choices that shape our spiritual journey.
That's the idea. And those choices, they add up over time.
They do.
They create a momentum that either pushes us toward higher densities or keeps us stuck in the lessons of third density.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility, even if we don't realize it.
It is, but it's also empowering because once we understand that our choices have that kind of power, it changes how we see everything.
It makes you want to be more mindful, more deliberate in how you live.
Definitely. It encourages us to look at our motivations, to think about how our actions affect others, and to choose love over fear as much as we can.
Okay, so for everyone listening, how do we take all these big ideas and make them real in our everyday lives?
I think it starts with paying attention, notice your thoughts, your words, your actions, ask yourself, am I acting out of love or fear? Am I helping others or just looking out for myself? And it's not about being perfect. Right? No, it's not about perfection. It's about making progress.
It's about trying to align with love, with compassion, with understanding, even when we mess up.
Exactly, and trusting that even when we make mistakes, there's always a chance to learn and grow and get back on track.
It's a journey.
It is. And don't forget to be kind to yourself along the way, this whole spiritual evolution thing. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
So take your time. Let these ideas sink in. Let them change you in their own way.
And keep asking questions, keep searching, keep opening your mind to the mystery of it all.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope it's given you more questions than answers and maybe sparked a little bit of awe and wonder about this amazing universe we're all part of.